Good. Cool. All right. I think we're ready to get started. It is 12 o'clock, so we have some people who are still coming in the door. We're going to welcome them as they arrive. At 12:01, I'll officially start. I want to give them the benefit of the minute because they're probably grabbing their lunch and something to drink and getting settled in their office or on the sofa or wherever they happen to be watching this. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. All right. Welcome to another exciting edition of Meet the Author, not at the Pyramid Club, but on Zoom. But our Pyramid Club friends are with us, so I thank them for coming. I also want to thank our friends that have joined us from our marketing partners. And also I have some special friends who have joined us from the Board of Pensions of the Presbyterian Church. Welcome, love you guys. I'm so glad you could make it today. What's coming up? So if you have not been to Meet the Author before, welcome, welcome. If you have, you know, sometimes we do things on Zoom, some things we do things at the Pyramid Club in downtown Philadelphia. Our next program is March 14th at the Pyramid Club in Center City, Philadelphia. We're getting our marketing together. We'll have all that up and ready within the next day or so. I am really excited that we have somebody that I think, if you're in the Philadelphia area, you probably know him. Glenn Hurricane Schwartz is going to be our guest author on March 14th, Thursday night at 6 o'clock. And he is, what do you think he's going to talk about? He's probably going to talk about weather, right? Because that was his thing for many, many years. We watched him on TV and he helped us know what was going on during the week weather-wise. So we'll have Glenn Hurricane Schwartz. I hope you can make it to Center City. That marketing should be up soon. And I also want to introduce Darby. Darby is our chat room ambassador. She is helping me behind the scenes. She'll occasionally post some things, ask some questions, make some comments. Darby, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And you are from the great state. You're in South Carolina.
I am.
Yeah, you may have traveled the furthest. I don't know if somebody in the chat, if you've traveled further, you let us know. All right, we are ready to begin. Anything that I've forgotten, Darby?
No, I think we're good to go.
I think so too. All right. I am delighted for this day. It was funny. And this morning when I was getting ready, I'm like, Teresa, you are going to learn something today. And I love that. I love that because there are things that this author has uncovered that she's going to share with us about my favorite city. Right? And things that have happened. Our author is Center City born and raised. She taught at Masterman. She worked for History Making Productions and also Hidden City. And she wants you to know this is not an academic book, gang. So it's published by Temple University Press, which, by the way, has a ton of really awesome books. So if you love Philadelphia, check out Temple University Press. But this is really a book that anybody can just read. It's not meant to be just used in the classroom. In fact, we talked, she said, this would be great for high school students. And what great timing, because here we are in Black History Month, and our topic is Black history. So I would like to turn it over to my author and welcome her. And what can you tell us, my friend, about Black history in the Philadelphia landscape? Amy Cohen, warm welcome.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to get started right now. Okay. And okay, we ready? Everything look good?
It looks good.
All right, well then, let's begin by addressing the elephant in the room. What's a nice Jewish girl like me doing writing a book like this? Well, in 2005, the School District of Philadelphia passed a mandate requiring a year of African American history for every high school student. At the time, I was a social studies teacher at Masterman. No one in my department had ever taught Black history. And like most social studies departments across the city and the country, we had no Black teachers. Having taught an elective about the history of Philadelphia, I knew a tiny bit about the importance of African Americans throughout the city's past. So I volunteered to teach the new course. And right from the beginning, local history was a focus in how I taught the class. Teaching African American history was the most engaging, revealing, disconcerting, and formative intellectual journey of my life. It reshaped how I view my hometown of Philadelphia and informed my perspective on a host of contentious social and political issues. When I left the classroom in 2013, I continued to learn and educate about local Black history while working for History Making Productions, a local film company that makes documentaries mostly about Philadelphia history. I also started writing, often about Black history, for Hidden City Philadelphia, an online publication about the built environment. The reactions I've gotten along the way from my students, from film audiences, from Hidden City readers, convinced me that there is fervid interest in local Black history across a broad cross-section of Philadelphia. And I knew that the book that began to take shape in my mind did not yet exist. And so, Elephant, I stand before you in full recognition of the immense privilege that permitted me the time and means needed to write this book. And, dear Elephant, one of the things that gave me the courage to write this book was a quote from Toni Morrison. If there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. I have tried to be respectful and sensitive, and I have sought the wisdom and knowledge of African American historians, librarians, tour guides, museum personnel, and people who lived through the events which I included in the book. Some of the amazing people I met agreed to share reflections, which are also included in the book. I hope that I have made the most of my privilege by writing a book that will bring people together in our common humanity and our shared affection for our city and its diverse residents. If you are not familiar with Philadelphia's Black history, I believe that the 19 chapters of my book will give you a good overview, though I did not set out to write a comprehensive account. If you are familiar with Philadelphia's Black history, I hope that you will enjoy looking at that history through a different lens, that of the landscape. So why focus on the landscape? I have long been intrigued by how history is interpreted through markers, monuments, and so forth. For years, to the chagrin of my two daughters, I had a bumper sticker that said, "I break for historical markers." In 2004, students in my Philadelphia history course successfully applied for a marker to commemorate an anti-Black riot that took place in 1842, which taught me the power of grassroots activism in altering the landscape. When I started teaching African American history, I often included information about efforts to erect monuments, rename buildings, and so forth to make a connection between the past and present. After I left teaching, controversy about the removal of Confederate monuments drew national attention, and attention only increased to such matters following the police murder of George Floyd. As most of you will recall, the protests here led to the removal of the Frank Rizzo statue from the Municipal Services Building. But most of the examples in this book are not nearly so dramatic. Many alterations to the landscape are the result of the persistent effort of dedicated individuals who care enough to make sure that people and events in local Black history are acknowledged, whether through erecting markers, painting murals, changing street names, renaming public spaces, creating historic districts, preserving historic sites, or even creating full-fledged memorials in prominent locations. Philadelphia-based Monument Lab defines a monument as a statement of power and presence in public. To me, this means that these forms of altering the landscape are indeed monuments. In the introduction to the book, I list 4 generalizations that describe the process through which the history reflected in the landscape is changed. History is not the past. It is an ongoing process of interpreting the past. The past does not change, but our understanding of it does. Historical interpretations often reveal more about the times in which they are written than they do about past events. And as our historical interpretations evolve, our monuments reflect new understanding. We cannot change our past, but we can change our monuments to reflect a more inclusive understanding of our past. Changing the monument landscape is not an automatic process. It takes effort, organization, commitment, and yes, money and political will. But as you will see in this book, Philadelphia's landscape increasingly reflects the important role that Black people have played, the oppression they have experienced, the courage they have demonstrated, and the ongoing struggles for equality. For today, I'd like to focus on a monument that I can almost guarantee you have seen if you live in or around Philadelphia. It sits at a prominent location on the Parkway, across from Franklin Institute. You have no doubt whizzed by in a car or walked past on your way to one of the many nearby institutions. The monument, the All Wars Memorial to Colored Soldiers and Sailors, is worth your slowing down and paying attention. Its history tells us a lot about the role of Black people in the military and the struggle for recognition of this service. In both the American Revolution and the Civil War, Black people were first barred from fighting and then eagerly recruited when it became clear that their manpower was needed. Black men known as Buffalo Soldiers fought against Indians in the American West. Black soldiers helped the Rough Riders win the Battle of San Juan Hill and were instrumental in defeating guerrillas during the Philippine insurrection. And by the time this monument was commissioned, Black men had fought bravely during the First World War. In each of these conflicts, Black people served in segregated units and were assigned the dirtiest and most menial tasks. They were usually under the command of white officers, and even in uniform, they risked discrimination, humiliation, and violence because of their skin color. Samuel Beecher Hart is the person who successfully advocated for the Philadelphia Monument to Black Soldiers. Born in Philadelphia in 1863, Hart became a captain in the Gray Invincibles, a Black National Guard unit that was disbanded with little warning in 1900. Hart later served in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives from 1924 until his death in 1936. His district was the city's 7th Ward, the area from 7th Street to the Schuylkill River, from Spruce Street to South Street, then home to a concentration of the city's Black community. The 7th Ward is the area studied by W.E.B. Du Bois in his groundbreaking work, The Philadelphia Negro, a topic of another chapter in my book, and also the source of the map that I'm showing to you now. During his first term, Hart proposed a bill to commission a monument honoring 150 years of military service by African Americans. The bill was defeated, but 2 years later, Hart was more familiar with how to maneuver in Harrisburg, and in 1927, his proposal was passed and signed into law. A 7-person Colored Statues Commission was formed, which included Hart and 4 other Black members. As the result of a design competition, J. Otto Schweitzer, a Swiss-born sculptor based in the Tioga neighborhood, was selected to create the monument. My assumption is that this choice was made to smooth the way to the monument's installation. He had already designed numerous war memorials, including 7 for the Gettysburg battlefield, more than any other sculptor, 8 busts of military leaders for the city's Union League, a sculpture of General Van Steuben for Valley Forge National Historical Park, and, pictured here, a monument to Confederate women that still stands at the Arkansas State Capitol. The selection of Schweitzer and the approval of his design were much smoother than the process of choosing a location for his work once completed. The city's powerful all-white art jury denied the Colored Soldiers Statues Commission request to place the memorial on the parkway. The art jury claimed it didn't want to turn the city's intended Champs-Élysées into an avenue of war memorials. Yet it had recently approved the placement of 2 new Civil War monuments on the parkway. The art jury suggested Fittler Park as an alternative site. Although Fittler Square today is a charming spot in an upscale neighborhood, in the early 1930s, it was a neglected parcel of land adjacent to a Black neighborhood to the south and a working-class Irish neighborhood to the west. Note that these photos are from 1947, a little later than the period we're talking about. Many white residents of the area were opposed to the placement of the memorial in their neighborhood. The landlord of a Pine Street apartment building facing the park feared that the presence of the memorial and the visitors it was likely to attract would cause him to lose tenants. Black Philadelphians were even more resistant to putting the memorial in Fittler Park. John Marchese, the exalted ruler of the Quaker City Lodge of Elks, otherwise known as the Black Elks, visited the site and described it as follows, quote, "To my surprise and utter disgust, I found Fittler Park a miniature wilderness in a godforsaken section of this metropolitan city. Leaves, litter, and rags upon the day of my visit were scattered everywhere. The seats were dirty and apparently exhausted themselves, begging for a little paint to hide their nakedness." Marchese returned to the park at dusk and was even more dismayed. Quote, "Dirty children, drunken bums, pothounds of shore mongrel strain, these were the lot which sported on the spot where there was to be erected a monument to heroic Negro soldier dead." Although not all detractors use such colorful language, opposition to the Fittler Park location appears to have been nearly universal among African Americans. Not only was the site remote and in disrepair, it was also unlikely to be unsafe for both the monument and its visitors, given the longtime antipathy between Philadelphia's Black and Irish communities. A 5-year standoff ensued. To maintain the support of Black voters, Republican members of City Council passed a resolution endorsing the placement of the monument on the parkway. Although the resolution was also signed by the mayor, it had no enforcement mechanism, and the art jury remained adamantly opposed. Eventually, a compromise was reached. On June 7th, 1934, the All Wars Memorial to Colored Soldiers and Sailors was dedicated in an obscure corner of Fairmount Park behind Memorial Hall. Samuel Beecher Hart, though disappointed with the monument's location, did have the satisfaction of participating in its dedication. Following a 2-hour parade that began at 16th and Spruce Street, about 3,000 people attended the opening ceremonies. The keynote address was given by the Reverend Robert Bagnall of the St. Thomas African Episcopal Church and a former high-ranking leader of the NAACP. In referring to the First World War, Bagnall stated that, quote, "Black soldiers fought for democracy. They did not win, for the world is less democratic since the war than before, as far as Negroes are concerned. He continued, calling for a war on everything that robs men of their rights, that robs Black men of opportunity, and therefore blocks the progress of our nation. Another speaker, Mayor J. Hampton Moore, defended the controversial placement of the memorial, saying that, quote, this monument needed to be placed on a mountaintop, somewhere in a place like this, to which people may come without fear of being run down by automobiles. Although Memorial Day ceremonies were held at the Fairmount Park site, the remote location continued to rankle, and the monument succumbed to weathering, vandalism, and neglect. Samuel Hart's granddaughter, Doris Jones Holliday, participated in the opening ceremonies and later spent many years trying to find support for relocating the memorial. In 1988, West Philadelphia City Councilman Lucian Blackwell spearheaded an unsuccessful effort to get the monument moved to a more prominent location. In 1993, Michael Ropel, a member of the Philadelphia City Planning Commission, formed the Committee to Restore and Relocate the All Wars Memorial. Ropel's group garnered the support and endorsements of Mayor Ed Rendell, the Fairmount Park Commission, and the Art Commission, which had replaced the art jury. City Council appropriated funds for restoration and relocation of the monument. The granite and bronze memorial was thoroughly refurbished, and on Veterans Day, November 11, 1994, the monument was at last rededicated at its longtime location. Among those participating in the rededication ceremonies on the Parkway was Doris Jones Holliday, the granddaughter of Samuel Beecher Hart. As she had in the earlier dedication, she pulled one of the cords at the unveiling of the monument. She told a reporter that day, "The dream has come full circle." Although Hart served in the Pennsylvania legislature for over 10 years and was the oldest and longest serving Black representative at the time of his death, the completion of the All Wars Memorial, the monument he had always pictured on the Parkway, remained his proudest accomplishment. Now that the All Wars Memorial is located on a major city thoroughfare, it is visible to large numbers of city residents and visitors. Given that it is a large granite shaft surrounded by bronze figures and bronze plaques, at first glance it is similar to other traditional monuments that dot the Parkway. On the front of the monument, the largest, highest, and central figure is a woman representing justice. She is holding two wreaths, symbolizing honor and reward. On either side of her are the life-size figures of Black men in World War I uniforms. On her left are 3 soldiers. On her right, 2 soldiers and a sailor. On the back of the monument, there are 4 female figures symbolizing war, peace, liberty, and plenty. Like the figure of justice, each of these women appears to be white. In the 21st century, it seems odd that this monument honoring Black military men has such a large presence of white women. Perhaps Samuel B. Hart and the other members of the mostly Black Colored Soldiers Statue Commission recognized that a design using traditional symbols and white imagery would be the most palatable to the art jury and other authorities. Though the All Wars Memorial may strike us today as dated, it was commissioned during an era in which almost no civic monuments depicted Black people or recognized Black contributions to American society. It was also a time when the American military remained strictly segregated, despite Black people having fought and died in every war in American history. So next time you find yourself near 20th and the Parkway, Take some time to visit this monument and consider how long it took to get it to its rightful place. It is an ideal spot to contemplate how far we've come and what next steps toward recognizing Black sacrifice in the military might be appropriate. I have just given you a summary of one chapter of my book. At the end of each chapter, I include suggestions for ways to further your understanding of the content. For this chapter, I include 4 concrete suggestions. The first one I have already shared. Go visit the monument itself. The second is to find the 12th and Lombard building and historical marker for St. Peter Claver Roman Catholic Church, a once bustling Black church and community center to which the Hart family belonged. Third, you can go to see Hart's residence at the 2021 Waverly Street address, the yellow row house you see here on the right. Fun fact, according to the Philadelphia Tribune, Samuel Hart's wife was the first woman in all of Philadelphia to vote in the 1920 election, for which women had finally been granted the franchise. If you're inspired by your Waverly Street visit, apply for a historical marker to be installed out front. I think it could do nothing but enhance Zillow's Zestimate of a $640,000 purchase price for the house. And that last part is not part of the book. And finally, go visit the ACES Veterans Museum across from Vernon Park in Germantown. It is a museum with a worthy mission that could use much support. It is housed in what was a USO facility for Black soldiers during the Second World War. And I appreciate your attention. I am very eager to hear any thoughts and questions. But I first want to let you know that I have a website where you can learn about other events where I'll be speaking on other topics. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to get in touch with me personally. There's my email address, and I am eager to go to book groups, church groups, classrooms. My mission really is to get this information out there. So if you or someone you know would be interested in having me come and speak, I would love that. And very special news for all of you. Because you're on this Zoom, you can get a 20% discount on all Temple Press books, including mine. If you use the code there, T20P, you can either scan the QR code to get to the Temple Press website, or you can find it right there. I think the QR code will take you directly to my book, but any book you buy there, and as Teresa said in the beginning, they have lots of Philadelphia history content. And then also, if anyone listening today lives in the Northwest Philly area, tomorrow I'm going to be at the High Point Cafe at 620 Carpenter Lane from 3 to about 4:30 or 5 for a book signing and reception. If you want to buy a book there or show me that you bought your book from Temple Press, you'll get a complimentary tote bag. If you've been coveting mine in the corner, that's how you get one. And I thank you for your attention. I hope you have some reaction, and I look forward to engaging. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And we can actually take down our screen share, and we put the code in the chat so folks can see that. And I know I have some questions for you. Folks that have questions, you can post them in the chat, and we will be sure to pass them along to Amy. I'm curious, Amy, how many years did it take you to research and get this book out?
It was really the accumulation of 20 years of work from things that I learned when I was teaching, to then things that I learned or learned more about when I was working at History Making Productions. And then when I was writing for Hidden City, for a couple of years, I was writing monthly, and not all, but many of the topics were African American history related. So it was all of that accumulated such that once I had turned in my proposal and got a contract, I wrote the book in a year, but
But it was
it was it was
years of
20 years
collecting.
that I took a year to kind of
Yeah.
put on
Yeah.
paper.
So over the years, all of the stories and things that you uncovered, what is a story that you uncovered that really was emotionally impactful, was something that really stayed with you? And I'm sure there were probably several, but is there anyone in particular that you want to share?
Um, Personally, emotionally, yes, actually. This is one of the chapters where I really learned a lot. It's about the First African Baptist Church, which for a long time was located at 16th and Christian. And after I'd started teaching African American history, I was driving by the church, and a historical marker, as I said, I break for historical marker out front, caught my attention. And let me just read it to you. Okay, I found it in the book.
Okay.
First African Baptist Church, founded in 1809 as one of the first Black Baptist churches in America. Later, two members sold themselves into slavery to free a slave to serve as pastor. And that just
Wow.
blew me away.
Yeah.
And I was always curious about it, but at the time I saw the sign, I had two young daughters, I was teaching full time, but for the book, I learned that whole story, found out the history of the church, and it turned into like a really um, interesting case study of gentrification and preservation and tension between the two, because the pastor at some point in the mid 20 teens wanted to sell the building. It was in bad shape, and most of his congregants had moved to other neighborhoods for reasons that I go into in the book. But then preservationists wanted to keep the building. So there was this tension between kind of historic preservationists who said, no, you can't knock it down, and the congregation that said, we need the money. But the building did end up getting protected, and it's now a beautiful boutique hotel and event space called the Deacon that I visited. And there's a separate chapter about Black Doctors Row, which is part of Christian Street. And it's on that corridor. So,
Okay.
what started with a street sign that made me just gasp, turned out to be feed into two chapters in the book.
Wow. And which is interesting because how do you even know where to begin? And it sounds like you've got these historical markers in the city. What was it that prompted you to write each of these chapters? Was it just discovering things along your path? Were there other resources that were helpful to you?
It just really depended on each case was different. I mean, some, like, I knew that I had to have a chapter on the period when Philadelphia was the center of free Black life, which is roughly 1790 to 1840. And the two prominent leaders during that period were Richard Allen and Absalom Jones. And I knew generally their history, and I knew some of how they were represented in the landscape. But once I went digging, there were many more examples than I was aware of, murals in places that I hadn't been. An old burial ground for Mother Bethel Church, which was founded during that period by Richard Allen. The burial ground had become a playground, and recently it was discovered to have been a burial ground. So a memorial is going to be going in there. So I would just kind of follow any tangent where there was a representation in the landscape. So that was kind of the filter. I mean, there are periods in Philadelphia's Black history that I don't talk about because they're not in the landscape. And probably the best example would be in 1944, there was a wildcat strike of the Philadelphia Transportation Corporation, which was the precursor to SEPTA. The drivers walked out because some Black men were going to be promoted to drivers, and
Hey, Darby, you still there?
I am. It looks like we have lost our guest.
We have. Yes, yes. And I was thinking it was me. So those of you that are still here, we'll hang tight. Hopefully she'll come back. It was just kind of weird. Before we logged on, I was having a little sound issue, but it looks like we might have lost Amy. Interesting stuff. I actually have a question for her. At our October Meet the Author, we had several people who have written books on Philadelphia history, and they also published through Temple University Press. And we had Murray Dubin on our panel, and he wrote a book called Tasting Freedom. And it was about Octavius Catto and the battle for equality in Civil War America. And Octavius Catto is anybody who is in Center City, Philadelphia, and walks around the City Hall, you will see his statue facing Broad Street south, looking south on Broad Street. And so if you'd like to learn more about him, and I was going to ask her if she had anything in her book about him, because I'm sure he probably had a chapter. Oh, I feel so bad that we lost her. We'll give her a minute or so to come back. In the meantime, you have, I'm going to give you some ways to connect with me. Up here she is. Welcome back.
I have no idea what just happened.
It was bizarre. It's like, and I thought it was me, Amy, because before, remember how earlier I had a little sound issue? So I'm like, is it me? And that's why
that has never happened. All of a sudden the internet went out. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Showing this mural.
There it is.
Anyway, I'm back. I'm sorry. It looks like we lost a few participants.
It's all right. No, don't worry about it. It's okay. Because we'll tape this and we'll have some folks who will be watching this.
That never happened.
We have a lot of people who watch the recordings. I had a question for you, and I was sharing with them. So I had the pleasure of meeting Murray Dubin, who is another Temple University author, and he's written a book about Octavius Cato. The book is called Tasting Freedom. And I believe, isn't that the statue, the monument that faces South Broad Street?
Right.
What can you tell? Did you cover him in your book at all?
Well, I'm laughing because I've done a lot of work on Octavius Cato, beginning with when after the book was published, I was hired to write a teacher's guide to it. And that was quite a while ago. Dan Biddle and Mary Dubin, the two authors, are dear
Yes.
friends of mine. So I wrote the teacher's guide, which meant I had already read the book. It's a tome. It's very thick. I don't have it here in my office, but believe me, it's
Oh, it's
a
big.
long book. So I read it again to come up with the teacher's guide. Um, and it was a fun project and I loved working with those guys, but I didn't really think that it was a practical book for classroom teachers because it's just too dense and too long.
Sure.
And I tried to make it so that teachers could use chunks of it, but I piloted it in my classroom, but it was not a great classroom book, but a great book. Anyway, so then fast forward, I guess that's when there was kind of talk about an Octavius Cato memorial, and Dan and Mary were involved in that. Of course, Mayor Kenny was instrumental in that. Carol Lawrence and Jim Straw were two kind of civic actors who played a big role. And so right soon, there were years of hearing, oh, it's coming, it's coming. You know, they had chosen Brantley Cadet as the artist. But it took a long time to raise the money. And fortunately, Jim Kenny went from being a city council person who was pushing for this project to being the mayor who was pushing for the project. So when it looked like it was actually going to happen, I thought it was such a teachable moment for the city. But not many people have the time to read all of Tasting Freedom. So with
Right.
Dan and Mary's permission, I wrote a condensed version of Tasting Freedom that was really just a biography of Cato, and got some grant money and published, I think, like 10,000 copies. We distributed them to Philadelphia public schools, to libraries. It still exists online. I still have copies. But so then I read Tasting Freedom again because I wanted to condense it. So it was, I did not do any of the original research, but I put it into more kind of layman's terms. I was aiming for like upper middle school through high school audience. So it was also appropriate for adults. And at that time, I was working for History Making Productions, and I spoke to my boss, Sam Katz. We already had a lot of footage and a lot of interviews about Octavius Cato. We had reenactments of different scenes from Cato's life, including his tragic assassination in 1871. And so I was a producer of a 15-minute film about Cato's life that's available online, historymakingproductions.com. So yes, I was there in the VIP section when that was installed in September 2017. It's actually the first article I ever wrote for Hidden City was about the Cato statue. And you mentioned Mary Dubin. I was sitting behind Mary Dubin and Dan Biddle when the statue was unveiled, and
Nice.
literally saw two grown men cry, and it was really moving. And so there's a whole chapter on the book about the memorial. But from when I first started working with Dan and Mary sometime in the 2010s to today, now that there's this memorial, Octavius Cato went from this really obscure person, not in the Black community, but most white Philadelphians had never heard of Octavius Catto, to
Mhm.
now many, many more people have, partly because of the book, but because of the statue, because people walk
Sure.
by it and who is this? And
Yes.
it's just just a really meaningful memorial. So I
Yes.
think it's actually the longest chapter in the book because I sort of had the most
Sure.
information and I knew the most about the memorial. Um, but yeah, that was a very big moment, and it happened to be unveiled just as things were heating up about Confederate monuments in the
Oh,
South. So
yes.
it was a really poignant juxtaposition.
Yeah. Well, I can't help but smile when I am on Broad Street and I see that statue, because now I have a sense of who he is, and people like yourself and Mary that care deeply about who he is and the history and his story. So and I think folks and I've been in a suburb of Philadelphia my whole life. I consider Philly my city. But I'll be honest, there's a lot I don't know about the history. And there's two resources, and you are actually part of one of them that has been that History Making Productions. I put the website out there. Gang, they are amazing, amazing films to see. Well researched, well put together, well done. You will learn a lot about the city. If you're more of a reader, Temple University Press has a ton. We put that link out there as well. Wonderful, wonderful resources. My good friend Tom Keels, he's written a number of books. Are you familiar with Tom, Amy? He
No.
is, oh my gosh, he does wonderful tours of the that cemetery that is so famous. I was just there. Laurel Hill. Laurel Hill.
Oh, okay.
But knows a lot about like these things in Philly you never would know. But anyway, take advantage of these links, bookmark them when you get a chance, get out there and read them. I have one more question for you, Amy, and it is, you take the time to research this, to write it, to publish it. You're going around speaking about it. And I can't help but think of the quote, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And I believe there are key messages for us today, though your book is a history book, but there are key messages for us today. From your perspective, what are the key messages for us today from your book?
Well, it's interesting that you use that quote, because the quote that for me is more central. Well, I guess I'll share two. One is, it's a William Faulkner quote. The past isn't dead, it isn't even past. So I think one of the messages of the book is that to understand the current day, we have to understand the past. And an understanding of Black history that's just kind of the contributions of great Black people from the past, which historically has been the way Black History Month has been used in schools, as kind of let's talk today, we'll talk about George Washington Carver, and then tomorrow we're going to talk about Booker T. Washington, and then we'll talk about Rosa Parks. That's not nearly enough. I think it's important to recognize that there is a history of institutional and structural racism that we continue to grapple with. And we absolutely live in a more enlightened time. Our schools, I mean, even in Philadelphia, schools were segregated. We have our fourth Black mayor. I mean, we've made huge progress in terms of interpersonal relationships, but that the fact that Black people were systematically kept from buying homes and relegated to substandard schools, those things we're still dealing with. So that's one message. from the book is that Black history isn't just looking at great Black individuals and Black contributions, but understanding just a deeper context. The other thing is I want to just read the epigraph to the book because I, I guess I'm an optimistic person. So this is a quote from Ibu Patel, who's the leader of Interfaith America, and it says, "Responsible citizenship is not principally about noticing what's bad. It's about constructing what's good. You need to defeat the things you do not love by building the things you do." And I
Beautiful.
think that that's really, erecting a monument or placing a historical marker or renaming a street, it's not going to bring world peace or, cure diseases, but it's a step to building a better, more just, more equitable society.
Yes. Well, you've done good work. And I hope that you sell tons of books.
I do too.
My sense is it's going to be a popular book. You couldn't have picked a better time to publish. And hopefully you'll get a lot of people at your book signing. I was thinking to myself, if I didn't have a full day tomorrow, I would be there to get my bag and a signed book. But I want to thank you for sharing the story, for enlightening us, particularly those of us that are from the Philadelphia area. It is nice to know what happened here, and it's a very special city. We know that's why we're here, and I want to thank you for your work and your time on this, and thank you for being a teacher. I have a soft spot in my heart for school teachers. I am a trainer in the corporate world, so I'm like your kind of a cousin of sorts from a
Right.
profession. But I think we make a difference in the world by helping to show people things that they may not have seen before and enlighten and uplift. And I'm glad you came back. Holy cow.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened. That really frightens me for future Zooms, but that's not your problem. So thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. I'm going to put in the chat. Here's all my social media stuff. So if anybody wants to connect, you've got my social media stuff. I want to repost Amy's book from Temple University Press so that if you can't make it tomorrow, because you want to do in person if you can, but if you can't, buy the book. She gave us a nice discount code for 20% off, which is substantial. Did you say that was for any book in Temple University Press or for your
Yes.
book?
Yes.
Wow. Interesting. I need to do some shopping. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Any closing thoughts? Darby, closing thought?
No, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And we look forward to March 14th, Thursday night, 6 o'clock. Glenn Hurricane Schwartz will join us and provide us with some information on the weather. And I see in Facebook, Audrey just posted, as a Philadelphian who is Black, often look at books like this written by a non-Black person and think this book is written to hopefully expand the knowledge of a people's struggle. This is especially relevant as we go through this time of canceling the Black culture. We generally do not buy your books for a host of other reasons. However, as I age, I'm always interested in continuing to amass more knowledge that has been suppressed. I stumbled on this Zoom and I'm glad I did. Audrey, I'm so glad you joined us.
Yeah,
Audrey
thanks,
and I worked
Audrey.
together back in the day. So yeah, here I am. I'm watching this chat and I'm watching this chat. So there you go, Amy. I feel like a real producer here. You guys, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone have a good rest of your day, good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you in March. And thank you most of all, Amy. I appreciate it.
Thanks.